Greetings, my name's Norm Vaughn. I'm from Mount Royal University in the western part of Canada, Calgary, Alberta, and I'd like to share some thoughts with you about blended learning and shared metacognition. So to begin, there's 7 things I'd like to highlight. First, the concept of blended learning. Then we'll move on to student engagement, talk an overview about community inquiry and how this concept of shared metacognition was designed or derived from that framework. Then we'll move on to a research study highlighting the findings and the recommendations. So to begin, blended learning or hybrid learning. A lot's been written about blended learning, and I think there's a lot of confusion, and I'm really excited to have you share your thoughts and ideas in the discussion forum that'll accompany this presentation. From my perspective, myself and Randy Garrison, about 12 years ago, we wrote a book about blended learning in higher education, and 2 things that stick out for me is the organic nature, that we're combining face-to-face and online opportunities and digital technologies, but how we really have to be conscious of the people that we're designing for. Secondly was the idea that we really had to fundamentally redesign. This just wasn't adding technology to an existing course. This was really redesigning how the course would work, specifically with how we would integrate or combine synchronous real-time opportunities with asynchronous. So we'd have the energy of being in a face-to-face classroom or a webinar, but then we'd have opportunities for reflection and individual learning on our own. Next, I'd like to talk about student engagement. Similar to the concept of blended learning, I think this means a lot of different things to a lot of people, and this is the way I always like to start my courses in higher education, is have a discussion with the students about what this concept or term means to them. Again, a lot's been written about this, and one individual is Dennis Litke, who runs the bigpicture.org. He talks about the 3 R's of student engagement. How important is learning is the relevance, the connections, the curiosity. Secondly, it talks about the importance of relationships, that sense of community and collaboration. And third, this sense of rigor or challenge-based learning that we'll talk a little more about. Dive down a little deeper, there was, still is, the Hungarian psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who did a lot of writing in the 70s, in the 90s. He's the one who came up with the term "in the zone," and he talks about this mental state of flow when people are completely engaged with what they're doing. At the heart of this idea of flow is the idea of metacognition, our ability to learn how to learn, an awareness of our learning processes, and then also taking responsibility, making strategic decisions about our learning process. Now, I'd like to provide you with an overview to the community of inquiry framework. To begin, I know this can be contentious as well, and I'd like to cover this in our discussion forum, is really, what does an inquiry-based approach to learning mean? It means many things to many people, and I know in the province or state I come from, it's been quite contentious. In terms of background, there was an individual, Matthew Lipman, who worked at Columbia University with preschool children for a number of years, and he's the one who's actually credited with coming up with the term of community inquiry. And the key, what Matt found with young children, is that obviously learning's an internal process, but it happens through our dialogue, our communication, our work with other people. So while it's autonomous, it happens within us, it happens in a social and a communal way. 3 individuals picked up at that at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, which is the capital city of our state or province. Randy Garrison, Walter Archer, and Terry Anderson. And they came up with this community of inquiry, which talks about 3 spheres: a cognitive, a thinking process, again, the social process, but how important there's a teaching presence in it. It's shared, and we need the overlap of all 3 of these presents to have a really meaningful educational experience. out of that, Randy's been recently working with Zara Akol to develop this concept of shared metacognition. And the way it works is we know about self-directed self-regulation. There's the monitoring, the awareness, and the managing, the strategic action. But we're also finding that more and more it happens in co-regulation, happening in our interactions, our discussions, our conversations with others. And again, how we help each other monitor our learning and manage our learning. So the community inquiry, as I mentioned, has these three presents: social, cognitive, and teaching presence. And what we've observed is this idea of shared metacognition really happens at the intersection of cognitive and teaching presence. And what we're going to go on now is look at a research study and look at this idea of teaching presence in a little more detail. So from that, they derived a shared metacognition questionnaire, which consists of 13 questions around how I self-regulate. I'm aware, I monitor my own learning. Another 13 questions, how I engage in learning with others within a group context. And we're going to use this questionnaire in a research study. So here we go, the research study. Review to the research study. Again, I'm at Mount Royal University, which is in Calgary, Alberta. We have a 4-year education degree to prepare future teachers. And in our 3rd year semester, we have a series of courses around science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics that are integrated with a practicum, a workplace experience for students. So this is the semester we're going to study these courses and how the students are putting their learning into practice in a practicum situation. So the objective of this research study was to investigate how a blended of courses, a series of blended courses that I just talked about, could be designed and facilitated and directed to help their students develop their capacity for shared metacognition. We took an action research approach to the methodology, and I think this is important, is that we are working as a team to really investigate how we could support the learning of each other. In terms of data collection, what we did, 2 online surveys, the Shared Metacognition Survey, which was done at the end of October, just as students were finishing their coursework and getting ready to go at their practicum. Then we did the Community Inquiry Survey when they came back from practicum. Also, students were keeping a reflective journal or a blog throughout this fall semester. And so what we did is we looked at the student blog postings from the end of the course. The study consisted of 82 students, and in our education programs, they're primarily women. So the majority, 90%, were female, 10% male. And in terms of analysis, we used Google Spreadsheet to analyze the survey results. And then we used qualitative methods to look at the student blog postings, and we looked at that in Google Docs. So here's what we found. And what we did, we again aligned the findings around the 3 categories of teaching presence: design, facilitation, and direction. So in terms of design and organization, this is really about, the design, the planning process for the course. And the focus on this research study was specifically on designing learning opportunities for students, not only to take responsibility for their own learning, but to teach others, which is so important in a teaching course. We found it went fairly well, except the one thing we found was the importance of teachers, and in my case, I was the teacher for this course, clearly communicating the course goals, not only at the beginning of the course, but throughout, really emphasizing what was the importance, the key learning takeaways of the course. Facilitation, this really is the central activity of an educational community. And what we were emphasizing is the facilitation takes place not only by the teacher, but how the students were supporting each other's learning. So we found these are our Likert scale graphs from 1 to 5, 5 being where they really had a sense of belonging. And you can see the majority of students really felt that they had a sense of belonging in the course. And they went into a little more detail about that. They talked about, because they had a sense of belonging, that they felt comfortable interacting with the students. And we can see that the vast majority, 4 and 5, really felt comfortable interacting with the other students. And again, by feeling comfortable, I start to listen to the feedback, the comments that other students have. And I consider the feedback from my peers, what they're suggesting for me that I can do to revise assignments and those sort of things. Direct instruction really is the leadership. It's ensuring that students achieve the intended learning outcomes of the course or program. And, it really is providing opportunities for students to take responsibility for their learning, but again, helping others as well. So the one thing that we have a saying in Canada, pathological politeness. So while its students were willing to listen and give feedback to each other, there was some reluctance to challenge the strategies. Again, it's a 1 to 5 scale, and we had a large number of people sitting on the fence. They weren't quite there in terms of feeling comfortable about challenging, disagreeing with the strategies of their peers. And also challenging the perspectives. They found this is still something that they needed more confidence in able to do. And the one nice thing, though, is that as they went through the course, they felt a little more comfortable disagreeing with them, but still maintaining a sense of trust. Again, emphasizing that I don't quite understand where your idea is coming from. I really value you as a person, but I don't quite understand where that idea is coming from. Can you please explain to me? Is this from a research, study, personal experience, or is it just opinion, just the way you feel? Now, recommendations. Here's where we really want to take some time and focus. In terms of recommendations, again, design and organization really is critical. And going back to our beginning of this presentation with student engagement, Dennis Littke emphasizes the first R of engagement is relevance. Really helping students understand, what the course is and how it relates to their everyday life. So really developing a sense of curiosity and connectedness with the learning outcomes of the course. They feel like this is something for me. I'm really going to get something out of this that's personal to me. So in terms of some recommendations that we heard from students, is a good idea before a course begins is to develop an online survey, an anonymous online survey. Could be in the learning management system, it could be in Google Forms, but 5 key questions. What are your personal goals for the course? The bottom line is, what do you want to take away? The second thing is, what do you think is going to happen during the class sessions? These could be physical, face-to-face sessions, or they could be virtual webinar sessions. What will the professor in the class do? But more importantly, what will you do? Third, what do you expect to do outside of the classroom? What kind of work? Again, learning happens everywhere all the time. How do you think your learning in this course will be assessed? And fifth, really key, what type of assistance with your learning do you expect to receive in this course, and from whom? Obviously from your professor, but who else can support you in your learning journey? So we've got the online assessment. The other recommendation the students gave us is to create an online discussion forum, or it could be a face-to-face discussion, where students engage in reflecting back about a really powerful learning experience. It could have happened in a school, or it could have happened outside of school. Then debriefing as an entire class about what makes learning powerful, and using the community of inquiry framework to set of engagement guidelines for course. So how are we going to meaningfully work together? And again, how the entire class is creating these set of guidelines. Last but not least, again in a blog, it's really easy to get students into pairs so that they've got a colleague, a friend to work with throughout the course, setting the personal learning goals for the course. So here they're setting the learning goals for the course, but then also getting the critical friend to start giving them feedback, their peer, giving them feedback about the goals. So 3 ideas for really, really helping to create that sense of irrelevance right at the beginning of the course. Okay, and just a couple of things to emphasize about design and organization is that, learning doesn't happen overnight. Repetition is important. We don't get it the first time, fail, first attempt in learning. So we do it over and over. It's an iteration. It's a process. And the importance of designing and scaffolding activities that support shared metacognition, one activity leading to another and another, so that students can take more responsibility for their own learning, but also for the learning of others. Facilitation. So the second R of Dennis Littke's 3 R's of engagement was around relationships. How important it is to create a sense of communication and collaboration if students are going to develop shared metacognition, if they're going to feel comfortable teaching each other. So a few ideas. First idea is that our experience in Canada is that many students coming into tertiary or higher education have very little experience, formal experience, learning how to work in groups. So back in the mid-60s, Bruce Tuckman came up with these 5 stages of group development. Talks about the forming stage, the storming, norming, performing, and mourning or adjourning. We like to call it adjourning. How important it is to develop an activity like getting students in a group to work through a case study, something right at the beginning of the course. It's not worth a lot of marks, but that forces them to go through as a group to experience those 5 stages of group work. It can be face-to-face or online using collaborative tools like Google Documents, things like that. The second thing students suggested is they don't have a lot of experience in terms of learning and knowing how to provide constructive feedback to each other. The University of California at Los Angeles has developed the Calibrated Peer Review tool, which is really an exciting tool to use, and I encourage you to Google and go to this website. But it educates students how to give meaningful feedback. The instructor, the teacher has to create 3 pieces of work, sort of low, medium, and high quality, and it calibrates so students know how to give feedback and how to give it in a constructive way. About facilitation, the importance of teachers modeling the type of learning they want to see in the class, challenging, engaging in difficult conversations, and how a teacher's role is multifaceted. It's more than just being a guide on the side or a sage on the stage. It's a combination of both. Now on to instruction or leadership. This is the 3rd R of Dennis Littke's idea of engagement. It's rigor. It's the challenge. So how we design tasks that students and the scaffolding and the support from each other so they can complete a challenging problem, a task, or an assignment that forces them to confront different perspectives and new ways of thinking. Ideas from the students. So at the heart of the community of inquiry framework is this idea of cognitive presence. And cognitive presence has 4 phases or stages. The triggering event, asking questions, the exploration phase where students look at different perspectives, the testing phase, the integration, and then hopefully they're applying it or they're coming up with resolution. So if we're using online discussions, potentially what faculty can do then is get the students to label or code their online posts. In the online discussion forum, is this at the triggering event level? Is this a question you're posing? Are you sharing some information? Is this exploration? Are you doing some testing? Is this some testing you've done in life? And finally, how have you solved the problem, the resolution? So getting them to code those different things. about is the importance of learning contracts for group work. So getting students to come together as a group to formally put a contract together, to put their names to it, and to present this to the teacher or the professor for the course. And this is quite a detailed process because, again, each student has specific roles and responsibilities in the group. And it also has very specific conditions. If deadlines, if dates aren't met, what will happen to group members? And unfortunately, sometimes it could mean expulsion or removal from the group for not doing your assigned work in a timely manner. Back to the leadership, the direction that you as the teacher, you are the captain of the ship. You've got to move it forward. This idea of nudging or gently pushing students forward in terms of the cognitive presence, moving them beyond just exploration to integration and resolution. And just a reminder, because we're probably going to be using a lot of social media applications, the focus here is on a learning space. It's about moving students forward in the learning. It's just not a very superficial space. So in terms of conclusion, just a little bit of an overview again, how blended learning and metacognition can really make a difference for students' learning. But I really want to this isn't something completely new, and I'm sure if you look into the different indigenous ways of learning in Brazil, it's no different. This is from the country of New Zealand, from the Maori culture. They have a word in their language, it's ako. So they don't have a word for teach, they don't have a word to learn, it's ako. I learn through teaching, and I teach to learn. So it's like the idea is teaching is to learn twice. And they talk about how powerful it is when teachers and students are learning together. It really empowers everybody in the learning environment. Just going a little deeper is John Hattie, who is originally from Auckland, the largest city, not the capital, but the largest city in the North Island of New Zealand. He's at the University of Melbourne now in Australia, but he talks a lot about visible teaching and learning, and this is a quote I'd like to leave you with, is when teachers see the learning through the eyes of their students, and when students see themselves as their own teachers, they're empowered now to help others. So with that, thank you so much for listening to me in this presentation. Again, any questions you have, I know there'll be a discussion forum, but I to as well. If you ever want to get in touch with me, here's my email address. But if you just Google me and you remember how to spell my last name, Vaughn, I'll come up very easily. And again, my apologies. My Portuguese is very limited, but I'd love to reach out with you and continue this dialogue. So again, thank you so much for taking the time, and I look forward to engaging with you through the discussion forum and email. All the best. Take care.